Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the NAACP Virginia State Conference Game Changer um, Zoom webinar on the new laws that's going to start on July the 1st. So we have some experts. Pull out your pen and paper, take some notes, but you will get a recording. And so we're just going to jump right into it, and you'll learn all about the new laws. That's going to be a high level of new laws that's going to help us share with our members and our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to President Bailey to bring your greetings.
Thank you, Gayleen, and greetings to all the freedom fighters and all others who are listening in with us this evening. Welcome to this power-packed and information-filled session that we're going to have. As Gayleen has said, as it happens every year after sessions, new laws go into effect on the 1st of July. And we in the African American community for years have had what we call the talk in order to make sure that all of our people, especially our Black young men, understand how to deal with new laws and how what we should do if we intersect with those laws. And so, as Gayleen said, we have a very, very good panel, all of whom are members of the NAACP who do a variety of things, but they bring their expertise to you this evening to ensure that we are ready and understand the impact of these new laws on us and how we should conduct ourselves as we go forward. So thank you all for joining. And with that, I turn it back to our political action chair for the NAC Virginia State Conference, Miss Gayleen Knoyton.
Thank you, President Bailey. Well, our first speaker is going to be Delegate Marcia Sia Price, as we call her. She represents the 85th District, which is the Newport News area. But she's a champion for voting rights and healthcare and just a little bit of everything. But she's very well versed. I always like listening to her because she gets right to the point and she makes it where you understand it. And that's so easy. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Delegate Price.
Thank you so much, Gayleen and President Bailey and everyone for the invitation to speak this evening. I am really excited about the coming of July 1st because there are some new laws that will be going into effect. As Gayleen stated, I work a lot within voting rights, and I am the chair of the House Privileges and Elections Committee, and that is the longest continuously running committee in all of our nation, and I'm the first Black woman to chair that. So it's my honor, my privilege, but it's also my responsibility to make sure that some really good laws come through there. So I wanted to go over a few of the bills that were passed that were signed by the governor, and everything goes into effect July 1st unless I say otherwise. And so I'm going to jump right in. And the first one is, I'm sure you all know because you were great partners in getting it done, but in 2021 we had a Voting Rights Act of Virginia that was put into place. Well, since 2021, we've seen even more shenanigans happening across the country. And so this year, we made our state level Voting Rights Act even stronger. And so, for instance, the previous bill pointed to the federal 1965 Voting Rights Act when we were mentioning what we wanted to happen in Virginia. But unfortunately, we saw that that's been gutted. And so instead of just pointing to that, it states it on its own and clarifies the legal standards that the court should use when evaluating claims of voter suppression. So basically, it makes sure it's easier for Virginians to sue should the protected classes' voting rights have been impacted. Also, there was a high threshold for language access, and language access can be another language. It can be help with illiteracy. It could also be ASL, American Sign Language. And so we lowered that so even more people will have help with that. And I think the biggest part for the NAACP, it used to be that only the attorney general or the impacted voter could sue. Now, an organization such as the NAACP can sue on behalf of impacted voters should there have been vote dilution or voter suppression. I will let y'all know, though, Just because we got the bill passed doesn't mean that the fight is over. Illinois state level Voting Rights Act is being challenged by y'all's Department of Justice. So we are going to keep an eye out on that, but know that we have one of the strongest and boldest state level Voting Rights Act, the first of the South and one of the strongest in the nation. Also, you all, as a partner in some of the litigation, are no stranger to the fact that our previous governor purged voters using outdated information, leading eligible voters to have been kicked off of the voting rolls within weeks and days of elections. And so we passed House Bill 972, which is an omnibus bill with several new things that governors and executive branches have to do before they can kick someone off, the notification that they have to give to someone. So we need y'all to check the mail just to make sure, but they have to mail people to let them know that they've been canceled, to allow for them an opportunity to fight back. And then it also raises the confidence level that the elections folks have to have in the data before they use it to purge. So this would have prevented the information from the Virginia State Police when people were getting kicked off because technical infringements upon their parole or release agreements happened, and it looked like new felonies. That's what happened in 2023, and then in 2024 and 2025, we know we also had some citizenship questions. So a lot of this will be prevented by that bill. As we are very excited, starting July 1st, which means in time for August 4th, Sunday voting will no longer be optional, but mandatory and uniform across the state for the second and third Sundays before all elections. So that includes special elections, that includes primaries, it also includes general. So that's why I'm mentioning August 4th, but definitely in place for November in case you don't have a primary in your area. Also, relating to the activities that can happen behind closed doors, there are some electoral board members and some general registrars that do not have Black voting rights in mind or at heart, and they will now be easier to be held accountable with House Bill 41. And then, funny story, there's some people out west where incarceration facilities are located who realize that they are incarcerating people at such a high rate that the number of people that are incarcerated, should they actually pick up a ballot and choose to use their right to vote, could sway an election for those localities. And these folks put in a bill trying to prevent that, but because a lot of hate kind of prevents intellectual processes, they actually put in a bill that's really, really good. And it's a reapportionment and reallocation of populations for population data, as we're doing like what we did to prevent prison gerrymandering, that now applies to all of the mental health and commitment facilities as well. So wherever you go, even if you're committed, if you're incarcerated, your address, where you live, does not change just because you go out there, but only for the purposes of redistricting. You can still vote wherever you live. So should y'all ever want to organize the incarcerated that have not lost their right to vote, they could really be impacting some of these small town elections, but we'll talk about that for a different day. Very quickly, I don't know if y'all know this, but in 2024, there were 2 people in Waynesboro County that refused to certify Waynesboro County election results. What that could have done was nullify all 4.3 million votes that we all did for the November 2024 election. Why does that matter? Not just because it would take away our voice, it would actually abdicate our decision to the House of Representatives as it pertains to who we were electing for president, and also the House of Representatives. But as it pertains to local and constitutional offices, there is no remedy, so those positions would have remained vacant. 2 people in Waynesboro could have done that. Luckily, the courts decided on the favor of those that sued, but now we don't even have to worry about it. We passed House Bill 78 that makes it mandated for the election results to be certified. And I'm sorry, y'all, some of this is really in the weeds, but I need y'all to know it's really important because these bills were in reaction to not just ideas or thoughts, but actual actions that people took trying to take our right to vote. As y'all know, in Virginia Beach, there was a voting system that the court said was voter suppression, but Virginia Beach was still, the city council was still trying to move forward with that. We now have not only the court case, but an actual law now that says if you're converting the way that you do single member districts, it cannot have voter suppression be a part of that. We are back in ERIC, which is the Electronic Registration Information Center, which means again that we're protecting ourselves from illegal purges with bad data. And then there's some others that sound really little or you may not know a lot about, so I can come back and talk more about them. But Virginia is now in the National Popular Vote Compact, and we are now, I think, at like 217 votes. So once we get that compact to enough states where we have 270 electoral votes, our vote will go with the person that got the most votes. So it is a workaround from the Electoral College. Virginia is a part of that. So now we're working with some other states to join in so that we can get to that 270. Now here I need you to remember the next few bills, they do not go into effect July 1st. They go into effect January 1st. But starting January, you know how we have to get our absentee ballots in by noon on the Friday? Well, we will now have until 5 p.m. on that Friday, starting January 1st. Also, when you send in your absentee ballot or you have a provisional ballot, usually there's a set amount of time until that Friday for you to fix any errors that might have been on there. Say, for instance, they want the full social and you missed that part, or you accidentally put today's date instead of your birth date. You have a specific amount of time to go back and fix that. It was Friday. We've moved that to the Monday after the election, starting January 1st. And so that is a lot of the bills that we had that are protecting our rights and making it easier to vote. There's also one that says firearms are not allowed within 100 feet of voting locations unless they are law enforcement or that is where they also live. So we're trying to keep us safe while we're voting. I still want to put a plug in for two things: voting by mail and also the permanent absentee ballot list. If you sign up for the permanent absentee ballot list, your ballot automatically comes to you. You don't have to worry about law enforcement, ICE, or anybody being at your polling precinct. You can just get that in the mail. And lastly, I want to talk about the 3 constitutional amendments because it's really important that we understand what happened in April, where an entire election was overturned by 4 judges, should make us mad enough not to tap out, but to tap in and lean in even harder. We have the opportunity, should we say yes 3 times on the November ballot, to change our Constitution to protect our rights, our bodies, and our relationships. We don't know the order that they'll be in yet, so I'm not going to give you numbers, but I'll give you names. The right to vote one. Senator Locke is chair, and I am co-chair of the committee on this one. And it basically puts into our Constitution that we have a right to vote. Currently, our Constitution does not say Virginians have a right to vote. That will be very important should there be any more shenanigans from the federal government or anyone should there be a Virginia General Assembly that has more people against democracy than for democracy, trying to keep this C3. But that is really important. It also adds an automatic restoration process should someone lose their right to vote because they committed and were convicted of a felony right upon their release from incarceration. So that's one of them. The other, I know a lot of people are calling it the abortion one, but I want to let you know it's so much bigger than abortion. I'm calling it the Reproductive Freedom Amendment. It is allowing for people to have access to the full spectrum of healthcare services for bodily autonomy. Whether you identify as a he, she, or they, you were included because it goes from condoms and IUDs all the way to postpartum care and everything in between. So I think it's really important that as we're talking with people that we know it's not just about the one service that can be involved, but all of the services for all genders. And the last one, marriage equality. And this is basically putting into our Constitution that there should be no discrimination in the enterprise of marriage based on the basis of race, sex, or gender. That is not currently in our Constitution. So, yes, loving that case happened in Virginia, but it is not in our Constitution that the interracial marriage, that same gender marriages are protected. Now, I want to be very clear. This has nothing to do with what occurs in your church or in your place of faith. This is not about holy matrimony. This is about everyone having the same access to laws and regulations regarding marriage. And so we are asking that you vote yes 3 times in addition to voting for all the candidates that you're going to vote for. But we need yes to the right to vote, yes for reproductive freedom, and yes to marriage equality. And that's all I have for right now. There's so much more we can get into, but we gonna get y'all a budget first, and then maybe I can come back and talk more after that.
Yes, yes. And Delegate Price, thank you so much. That was a great recap on and everything that you said, and especially on the marriage equality. She's going to actually send talking points that we will be able to use because that's so important. It's bigger than what it really means. It's just about being in the Constitution, and we have to be able to articulate it that way. One last thing I just want you to talk about. It was a big deal, and that was the bill signing this past Thursday. If you can talk about the sickle cell anemia package.
Okay. So, as many of you know, former delegate, now Secretary of the State, Secretary of the Commonwealth, excuse me, Secretary of the Commonwealth, Candy Munding King out of Prince William County, her beloved daughter, 15 years old, Candace, passed away from a sickle cell crisis. She had gone through so much pain, but was a warrior. And through her experience, Candy Munding King and her family had become kind of experts on sickle cell, but also experts on how the medical system was letting down mainly African Americans that were survivors and warriors of sickle cell. So, what we did with her leadership, with the governor's signature, with the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and all of us together, there was a package of bills that was passed that were signed into law on Thursday in Newport News. And that is the first of the nation for this kind of package. And so what it covers from a registry so that as you go to different providers, your information will follow you. It also, I think, for this meeting's purposes, one of the main things it makes providers go through cultural competency training such that we can try to get over whatever report came out in like 1920 that said Black and brown people feel pain differently. That is still the veil through which they see us when they are treating us. And so sickle cell patients are often accused of being drug seekers when they're literally going through pain that is more painful than a heart attack and being treated with aspirin and you know because there are cultural assumptions. So that includes sickle cell, that includes race, that includes gender, that includes cultural biases. And so they will have to go through that training. And it was a host of bills. School nurses, school coaches will have to go through sickle cell training. So we're really, really proud of that. Again, first in the nation and a unified effort from the governor, the Senate, and the House. And those were signed into law on Thursday in Newport News.
Great. Thank you so much. As always, you give a great overview, and we will have you back because I know you'll have some more information to come to us with. But this was some great news. We still got some more work to do, but this is still we keep moving the needle. We keep moving the needle, but we want to thank you for all your work and always being a champion for our voting rights and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, so that was great news. I tell you, I just want to say that I was at the bill signing, and Delegate Alex Askew, his chief of staff, Dewan Stigall, he passed. He was 27 years
28.
old,
Yeah.
28 years old, and he had a rare form of cancer that stemmed from sickle cell anemia, and he passed. So having a bill like this that provide resources for families that's experiencing sickle cell anemia, this is the only package for sickle cell anemia in the country. So Virginia is on ahead again. So that's great news. All right, next we're going to bring on Valerie Slater. She is our criminal justice chair, and she's going to give us a brief overview on some youth and some adult bills that passed that's significant to us. Let me say that. All right, Valerie, I'm gonna bring you on.
Thank you so much, Gayleen, and good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to talk about the different things that we were able to do as it relates to criminal justice and youth justice. And I'm going to start with resentencing and expungement. Very excited that we were able to pass HB 26 and the governor signed, and it will be going into law on the 1st of July. HB 26 and SB 62, that's the marijuana resentencing. So anyone who is serving time now for a marijuana offense that would not be a crime now that we have decriminalized marijuana. There is going to be meaningful access to resentencing. That is really a wonderful thing. Now we're still fighting in the budget to actually get a retail market and some other pieces, but every time we can chip away a little bit more at the impact of the war on drugs, we're going to take it. And that marijuana resentencing bill is definitely one. And then the expungement of records in SB 230. It authorizes the expungement of police and court records when an initial charge, the individual was arrested or indicted, but the case was resolved without a conviction. That is going to be expungible. And understanding that in Virginia, in many states, expungement means a record is completely destroyed. But in Virginia, expungement only means it's sealed, but there are 3 reasons where an expungement can be opened to the court. Now, with a sealing of a record, there are 28 reasons that a record can be unsealed. So expungement is absolutely a stronger protection, but it is not like in other jurisdictions, other states, where it would be the destruction of records. But that's still a win. It's still a win. That's SB 230. And then we've got HB 361 that allows anytime someone is incarcerated while they're awaiting sentencing, well, the time that they spend inside of a local detention center or a jail, it's going to count towards the sentencing credit. That is a huge thing. It's a horrible thing to be incarcerated while you're waiting. You've already been convicted, and now you have spent this time, and it's not even counting. That we have rectified that with HB 361. And then thinking about some fines and fees, the incarcerated community service credit. So it's going to, and it's HB 16 is going to allow incarcerated individuals to clear outstanding court fines and fees through institutional labor. So whenever anyone is incarcerated and they're working, they're getting paid, and they're going to be able to use that to go towards whatever fines and fees are outstanding. And then there a partner bill to that, or a bill that is closely related and just as impactful, is the court debt collection extension. That means that individuals are going to, instead of 90 days when you get out, you're on the hook to get those fines and fees to start paying them. There's going to be a 180-day grace period. That's huge. I mean, we're asking folks to come home and immediately, 90 days, that's 3 months. when you're attempting to establish yourself after being incarcerated, who knows, it might take longer than just 90 days to get yourself completely established with a job, with a new place to stay, and all of those things. And on top of that, start paying back fines and fees. So to give that 180 days is really a benefit. And then Youth Violence Community Builders Program is going to allow for the expansion of the Community Builders Pilot Program, and it's intended to curb youth violence through localized public school initiatives. And what's beautiful about that is it this pot of money, people are going to be able to build out those programs. It's not prescriptive telling you what it should be. It's just making sure that the programs can be created. That is incredibly important. Let's see. So I'm sorry, and that bill is HB 1153, SB 820. And then HB 629, it's codifying two distinct criminal offenses, classifying the threat to share intimate images without consent to extort sexual acts as a felony. So imagine you're in a consensual relationship. You may share some photos, and then that person, you break up with them or whatever, the relationship ends, and they're taking your photos and attempting to force you to do things, force you to keep them from publishing your photos. They're trying to get things from you. Well, that's going to be a felony now. So that, we want to protect every person. I want to also talk about some youth justice bill. So the one that I'm incredibly proud of is SB 18. That is the bill that establishes a minimum age before a child can be charged with a crime in Virginia. We have fought for that bill for 5 years now. The last 2 years, it was our previous governor who vetoed it. And we finally got it across the finish line. So no longer will 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, no longer will we pull elementary age children into court on adjudicatable offenses. They don't understand the court process, and we should not be drawing them into a process that is going to do more harm than good, rather than providing them with the services necessary. We also successfully got signed, and will be going into law on July 1st, increased access to diversion for children. The law in Virginia says that there is only one opportunity for diversion. Now, there are already many jurisdictions that are not, they're not saying, oh, it's a strict prohibition. And so, they're using that diversion more liberally. They're already ensuring young people are not constantly criminalized, but that is not the case in every jurisdiction. And so now we have codified, it is not a prohibition on diversion. And even if a case goes all the way before it goes to the Commonwealth's attorney, it's before the judge with the Commonwealth's agreement and with the request of the defense attorney and the client, the judge is able to send it back, even if it does go up before the court. That's powerful. And that's SB 60 and HB 432. And finally, we're also able to get a bill, SB 70, HB, you know what, I'm not going to tell y'all a story. I'll make sure that you get the number. But what the bill that I'm talking about is increased and meaningful access to parole for individuals who are still incarcerated, but they were sentenced to life in prison without the opportunity for parole or de facto life while they were minors. So imagine being under the age of 18 and being sentenced to life. The Miller decision and the Montgomery decision by the Supreme Court, they said that it's cruel and unusual punishment, and in effect sentence a minor to 2 life sentences, because in some respects your life doesn't even begin until you hit 21. And so meaningful access needed to be provided to anyone in that situation. Well, Virginia, we had not done it. And now we have passed and has been signed into law 2 bills that are going to open up that access. So those are some of the highlights of what has been accomplished this year. You know, there's so much more that we wanted to get done. I'm just going to mention one bill in particular, and it relates to marijuana. We attempted to get passed a bill, HB 1432, that would have reduced, it would have taken away the criminal penalty associated for children who have or use marijuana on school property. The bill, it did not specifically, currently, it does not call out children, but it's kids that bring marijuana or hemp products to school. And they were the ones who we have now 3 times the number of children have gone before the court on marijuana offenses. 3 times the number of children since we decriminalized marijuana in 2021. We were attempting to rectify that. Last year, we were able to successfully say confiscate and destroy if it's hemp products. And here we now are saying, you know what, let's keep that class 2 misdemeanor in place for children with marijuana. Instead of saying, how do we address the underlying situation that is causing a young person to want to use a substance. So that bill didn't pass. We're going to bring it back. We're going to continue fighting for it. And I know that's not quite what the task is on hand for the night, but I just want to keep it at top of mind. We cannot allow another war on drug to begin because it will be against our children if we are not careful. So with that, I turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and thank you all this evening.
Great. Thank you, Valerie. We know you're on vacation on the West Coast, so we want to happy that you're on. But let me just say this. I am really glad to hear about the bill about the sentencing. And because in our area and under our attorney Rebecca Wynn, we had 2 young men that were sentenced at 17 and 18 years old with 1,823 years, and another one for 35. And Rebecca was able to do a pardon, and we were able to work with the administration. I was able to work with the administration, and we got those 2 pardons. So for a child not to be able to get that, because we just saw what happened in Texas, and so for a child to not be able to have that ungodly years, that's really good. So thank you for your work. We appreciate it. Enjoy your rest of your vacation, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we're going to move right along. We have Dr. James Fetterman. He is our education chair, and he is going to give us some updates on education. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kayleen, and good evening to everybody. So I'm going to give you some updates on the work that we're going to continue to do, but there is going to be major changes coming to the scoring and new tests and accountability measures this year for the Virginia Standards of Learning Assessment that our students take in elementary, middle, and high school. So the recent governor's listing tours, people overwhelmingly said that schools should be measured by growth and not raw test scores. So with that in mind, which tends to reflect demographics and opportunities that more schools will have an opportunity to show that our kids are far greater than just a single grade of an A or a B. So our current accountability system can reinforce racist assumptions about school quality based on demographics. So we know that there are schools that are in certain cities, certain towns that are expected to perform at the same level of many of the schools that are in suburban areas. And that is just not an equitable distribution of funds. And that will allow us to know how well our schools are doing as we advance to more of a student growth system. One of the things that's very important to highlight in the work that's continuing to happen is that there's been a good amount of progress on opening up pre-K seats for more kids based on income across the state. And as we look at these seats that are opening up with this at-risk add-on, that will grow in this final budget. If we continue to advocate, the final budget will increase by $100 million, moving it from $750 million a year. So this started as a measly $30 million a year in 2017, and it's now making our entire K through 12 funding system more equitable. There still needs to be almost double that amount to ensure that we have equitable outcomes in all of our cities and all of our towns in order to make progress. But one of the major things that we're finding in public education is that we have so many employees that are working in the schools as bus drivers, cafeteria workers, instructional assistants. Some of them are clinical aides, and many of them do not have family and medical leave. And under this session, if we continue to fight and advocate, this bill will pass this session that will allow those individuals who are disproportionately impacted to have paid family and medical leave. And that is huge for individuals of color in the Commonwealth to be able to receive those sorts of benefits. And as we continue to fight for children in public education, we need parents to continue to show up and to speak so that we can have our voices heard about issues that matter, ensuring that we are not allowing our history to be erased. So with that being said, I will send information that it may be shared out, but those are the highlights as it relates to children in public education. And one of the things that I will say that Virginia took a huge blow on was not getting collective bargaining. That was a huge loss for so many employees that could have benefited from having that collective fight with collective bargaining. But we're not going to give up. We're not going to stop fighting. While we have permissive language, that's just not strong enough. But if we continue to show up and have our voices heard, we will continue to move that needle as well. So, Gayleen, I will share information that it may be shared with the greater good, and I will stand for questions in the chat. You're muted.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Thanks.
Okay. Did I do? Okay. Okay. Now I'm good. Yes. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, just drop it in the chat. I mean, not the chat, in the Q&A. Drop it in the Q&A because we're going to miss it in the chat. So just drop it in the Q&A and we'll get those answered. Thank you, Dr. Fetterman. That was some great information and some exciting news, but we still got work to do. And as I always say, we still got work. We still have work to do. Next, we're going to bring up our housing chair, Tracy Hartney Scott, and she's going to give us an update on housing.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm excited, as you know, because we have made some significant impact to increase housing protections in the Commonwealth. The one I'm most excited about is HB 15, where we've been able to increase the mandatory wait time back to 14 days from 5 days. That was a huge win because we found that just those extra few days have made the difference in keeping people housed. So now the landlord will not be able to file for a writ of eviction until 14 days after the tenant receives the notice. The next one, expansion of payment methods. House Bill 1005, it requires the landlord that's covered under the Landlord Tenant Act to accept rent and security deposits by check or money order or any electronic payment, because what we have found is that a lot of people ran into problems of getting these payments made by stringent policies that landlords was putting. They didn't even want to take a check or money order. Some of them wanted only certified funds, and sometimes just those extra fees to acquire those things were proven to be very costly and boxing people out. The other one I'm excited about is House Bill 519, which now makes central air conditioning supplied by a landlord and operational at move-in a part of essential service. In the past, air conditioning wasn't considered an emergency unless temperatures were at a certain degree. So now House Bill 519 makes air conditioning supplied by the landlord essential. Also, just minorly, we've seen that we are still going to continue our cap on security deposits at 2 months, and that does include pet deposits. Some other mentions is that for now, for the first time, Virginia, which is the third across the nation, are allowing residents to install up to 3 UL certified plug-in solar systems per their meter, and they don't have to get landlord approval or permits for that, as long as it's within 200 to 1,200 watts, provided that the utility company doesn't have any prohibition in their area. So that's something that I'm excited about also for energy saving. And I know our environmental chair will probably speak on that in much greater detail. Another law that's going into effect, but doesn't go into effect until July of 2027. But already landlords and tenants are already encouraged to start preparing is a 90-day notice requirement for rent increases, because we found, especially with our LIHTC properties with the escalator rent clauses, it kind of puts people behind the eight ball. So starting in July, not this July, next July, landlords will be required to give 90 days notice of a rent increase. Something else that I'm excited about is the processing fees, putting a cap on the collection of processing fees that they have to be outlined. And this is a great thing for all of these junk fees that are coming up, mandatory trash fees, that are causing the residents a lot of out of pocket expense. Maintenance and repairs. Private landlords are no longer able to impose fees for general maintenance or repair of a dwelling unit. It's their responsibility, so they can only charge tenants for repairs now that are actually caused by the tenant and not just because. So those are some of the key ones. The last one that I want to mention is our military clause, that our military now does not have to give 60 days notice. That was HB 174, where military tenants who are terminating their leases early because of military orders, they will no longer be limited to 60 days before their orders take effect to make that termination. So those are some of the key ones that I have that I'm excited about and excited to share. I too will be around if there's any questions that go in the chat, and I'm going to turn back over to you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you so much. That was good information as well. And we still got work to do. We still got, but that's really good about the rent increase, that to have that, because so often it just happens like right away, and your rent increase and you don't have time to adjust. So that's great. Thank you so much, Tracy. All right, so our health chair couldn't be on tonight, and so I've got a couple of notes that I'm going to tell you about health. The HB6, which was the right to contraception, it codifies the statutory right for Virginians to obtain contraceptives and engage in contraception, and it protects both patients and healthcare providers. Then you have the HIV prevention protections was signed into law. It explicitly prohibits health and life insurance companies from refusing to insure or charging a higher premium to anyone with HIV. And then the next one is solely because they take pre-exposure medication for HIV. They should not be denied. And then you have the life-saving aid law enforcement passed as part of a broader public safety and medical response efforts. This bill requires on-duty police officers to provide life-saving emergency first aid to individuals suffering from serious bodily injury, provided it does not endanger themselves or the public. Also, we had a bill that failed. The prescription bill did fail, and the medical malpractice bill failed too. So we have to work on that. I do want to say I'm gonna give you a few of the gun laws. 20 gun laws passed. So starting July the 1st, the import of sale of manufacture and transfer of certain semi-automatic firearms classified as assault firearms are prohibited. The sale of any magazines holding more than 15 rounds is banned. The grandfather clause, firearms and magazines lawfully owned before July the 1st are not affected by the current orders, and they can keep them. You have under the youth and age restrictions, under 21 purchase ban. State law prohibits individuals under 21 from purchasing handguns or assault firearms. And also starting July 1st is the concealed handgun and permit storage. This state allows for concealed handgun permit applications to be submitted via written or electronic. We still have some ongoing challenges that we have to deal with that. And then our environmental chair had an event this evening that was pre-planned. She gave us a few of these as well. SB 802 which allows re-entry back into the regional green gas initiative, which we championed several years ago, and it was passed, where clean energy and community flood preparedness, market-based trading, and we combine with other states. And so this is a big deal. HB3 is the Department of Housing and Community Development Income Qualified Energy Efficiency and Weatherization Task Force established, which directs the Department of Housing and Community Development to establish, in collaboration with the Department of Energy, with assistance from the Department of Social Services, the Income Qualified Energy Efficiency and Weatherization Task Force to determine barriers to access and enrollment in current energy efficient programs for low income people. This is a big deal right here. So that's really good too. This and several others, you'll make sure you have that in your recap. So those are some really good information that you all received tonight. And now I am going to bring our analyst on, and that is Dr. Eric Clavell. And Dr. Eric Clavell is going to kind of give us a high level overview about the session and then talk a little bit about the data centers. Welcome, Dr. Clavell.
Thank you so much, Gayleen, and also everyone that's joining us on this annual meeting where we look at laws that will come into effect. So many areas have been covered, so I'm not going to delve into the entire session, but I will give a brief overview and more specifically where we stand as it relates to data centers. Well, one thing about this 2026 General Assembly session is that it was a lot going on. But it was also very historic, and I don't want that to be overshadowed. With the unification of this particular, this year's General Assembly, with, of course, the first woman being sworn in as governor, the first African-American Attorney General, and also Indian and Muslim American as Lieutenant Governor, this speaks volumes for what we see our country can and should be. But also, when you take a look at the General Assembly, they went right to work. The first, of course, we know about the 4 constitutional amendments that we're voting on and passed by the General Assembly, and of course, 3 that are on the ballot this November 2026 that was spoken about by our delegate and of course mentioned by others. But that is something that is very important as we look at post-session. And of course, we know about the mid-decade congressional redistricting referendum that passed. Virginia's voted for it, but ultimately overturned by the courts. So voting is very important. Of course, some major highlights of this legislative session. We take a look at, again, that was mentioned, the very comprehensive assault weapons gun control package. In addition to that, we also see where there is a showdown with our data centers, and then we're going to take a look and delve into that in just a second. But also our healthcare bills that were passed. Sickle cell was mentioned earlier, and then our affordability. The affordability platform by the governor was taken on by the General Assembly and her office through executive orders, and many bills were passed as relates to that, whether it be housing, whether it be prescription drugs, and the like. So a lot of these bills were bipartisan as well. Of course, some were not, and we don't expect all bills to be bipartisan, but some were. So where are we now when we take a look at these data centers? Before we delve into that, we do know that the General Assembly will be back in special session this month, June 18th, for the House of Delegates, and then also on June 22nd for the Senate. Now, as we take a look at this session, we do know that it ended, unfortunately, without a budget. But we have until the end of the month in order for a budget to be passed. And we're very, very confident that a budget will be passed. But primarily the issue is data centers. Now, we've heard a lot about data centers in this last session, of course, probably more than we've ever heard of in our lives. But with that, the primary focus as we take a look at data centers is on the amount of sales tax exemption for the data centers themselves. It's about $2 billion, which when you take a look at the studies, we look at about $1.6 billion annually that can be provided to the state when we take a look at revenue to the state itself. I want to give an overview of what data centers are and also the state of data centers here in the Commonwealth, the United States, and the world, and why they're so important. We've also heard a lot about artificial intelligence, AI. These data centers are the brain, if you would, or the hub that actually hold the information for artificial intelligence. With that being the case, Virginia, the Commonwealth, is the global leader in data center capacity. Now, most of that is in Northern Virginia, hosting about 13% of the world's operational data center capacity and 25% of the American share. And that's projected to grow based upon Virginia availability of land, strong fiber, closeness to the brain hub of the country and really the world. We're speaking of Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. So with that being the case, we know that Virginia is poised to continue to be the global center for data centers per capita and for the country itself. Now, when we take a look at those numbers, when we break it down and see what data centers, how they impact us and how they are positioned in our particular Commonwealth, we're looking at about right now 61 data centers, bills related, data center related bills that are currently being considered here in this General Assembly. Now, with that, that's on top of us currently operating 665 to 629, depending upon how you categorize data centers, how large they are, and so forth. But about 665 data centers in Virginia itself. California is second with 644, but the rest, when you take a look at the rest of the rest of the country, there are about 1,085 data centers nationwide. That's it. And we lead the country in those data centers. So with that, data centers are the key drivers for what we call the new economy of the world, and that is artificial intelligence. Right behind the United States, of course, is China, which actually kind of leads with about over 100,000 data centers themselves. So we're looking at a very important asset that the Commonwealth of Virginia has that now we have a major fight over. And when we talk about data centers, we talk about it in two strands. One being the hub that holds all of our information for the United States, our alphabet agencies, FBI, CIA, Social Security Administration, those agencies such as that. But then we also look at our private data centers, AWS or Amazon. We look at Google, Meta, and those others, major tech giants. Those are the ones that are driving a lot of the private data centers and also information that we share. There is a resource, and I'll provide this in the chat that I provided to everyone. It's a JLARC report. JLARC stands for the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission. This gives a great in-depth study of data centers in the Commonwealth. In 2023, JLARC directed the staff to do a study on the impact of data centers. So you're going to look at a summary of it, economic development, and various recommendations as relates to data centers themselves. Now, where are we here as relates to the Commonwealth? As relates to the Commonwealth and this budget stalemate, the question becomes, where do we find $1.6 billion in revenue if we do not take away the tax exemption from the data centers that are currently here? Now, there's a couple of arguments that are there. Number one is that these data centers are currently under various contracts, and to remove or alter those contracts midstream would be bad for quote unquote business in the Commonwealth. So therefore, one of the alternatives is to provide a use tax for data centers. Basically, the energy that they use, a fair use tax or consumption fee, not a tax. Nobody likes taxes, right? But a fee that they would pay for the consumption of the energy that they utilize. Now, why this is important is because data centers are projected to outpace what the amount of energy that they're using, and also that all of Virginia for itself, for the most part, can produce at a very reasonable price. So in other words, it's going to increase costs for all consumers of energy. If you're on Dominion, which if you're on this call, you are, your bill will go up in the near future because of the amount of or the demand of energy for these data centers. So how do we offset that? The other question becomes, how do we offset the impact of legislation that was passed by our president and the Republican-controlled Congress in Washington around the Big Beautiful Bill that basically cut $1 trillion of healthcare dollars from healthcare Medicaid expansion through the entire world, United States, and also removed over $300 billion from Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. The money is there. The question becomes, who's going to pay for it, and how do we balance our budget in looking at these shortfalls that we have coming, and that we, in light of the surplus that we do have. However, we know that because of the projection that that the monies that are taken away and the shortfall that we're going to have on the Commonwealth for healthcare. I did a show on my radio show just this week about the impact of hospitals being closed and clinics being closed, and the impact of jobs and those without health insurance is going to impact us. So therefore, that's where the budget stalemate derives from. We have a bucket of money, but it's locked into tax exemptions for data centers. We do have a surplus, but how do we utilize that surplus now and in the future, at the same time by providing and maintaining a level of services for those citizens here in the Commonwealth? So right now, the conferees are very, they have a high level of belief that they will reach an agreement before June 30th. I do believe that as well. In addition to that, the House has released their recommendation and the Senate released theirs on last week. So now it's a back and forth. The governor is backing the House recommendation for the budget, which once again keeps the tax exemptions for the data centers currently in place and deals with the shortfall now and having to address it in the next budget coming up. So we do know that every governor gets one real budget that they get to put out themselves. So it's not going to be this year, but in 2028, Governor Spanberger will be able to provide her full budget. So we'll see where that ends up when we take a look at what the budget forecasts are moving forward. So let's sit back, see what happens on the 18th and the 22nd, and Galen will come back and report it out.
That's right. And this evening, I was at a rally for Senator Locke and Senator Lucas did on it. And one thing I learned is that the data centers, they do recruit a lot of workers because they got construction, you got people that got to maintain the data centers and everything. So then that's why you have a couple of the unions, the carpenters and the IEBEW, that's concerned that are concerned about jobs being lost. But no one's really against the data centers in terms, as long as it stays away from marginalized communities, long as it's clean and doesn't raise our bills, and they need to pay their fair share. So they will be doing both senators will be doing listening tours, and we'll make sure we'll send that out. They'll be in Manassas tomorrow, and Wednesday they'll be in Virginia Beach, and I know they're going to Roanoke and they're going somewhere else, but they kicked it off today. So we'll make sure that in your recap that I'll send you those where those places are going to be. But and I'll make sure that we'll reach out to those branches in that area. Thank you so much, Dr. Clavell. That was some good information. And let me see, we have a question. Those of us in rural communities are having data centers thrust on us in addition to pending Valley Link project. project and more power natural gas plants, which will use millions of gallons of water, pollute air, water, and provide very few permanent jobs. The pushback on data centers across the country is huge. And that's true. Yeah, and that's very true. But this started back in 2008. And it was only with a few data centers back then, and it was 1.5 million. They never thought it was going to grow to this point to where it is right now. And so I know that Senator Lucas and Senator Locke, they will be coming if you're in the Roanoke area. You can go there, but I think we're going to add a couple more. I'm going to tell them because I was talking to Karen and see if we can add a couple more so they can come out and listen to what you had to say. They did say that there will be a budget by the 20. Well, they reminded us that Senator Tim Kaine, I think it was back in 2006 or when he was governor, that he didn't sign a budget to June 29th. So they're confident that they will have a budget. So we'll see what happens. Thank you, Dr. Clavell. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So you have got the what's going to happen on July 1st that you'll be able to share. You will get this information, and we're going to roll real quickly into how are we going to head to the midterms, and we have a plan. We want to launch, and we'll be doing a virtual press conference on Tuesday, launch Freedom Summer Virginia. And Karen, can you bring President Bailey on too, so he can chime in. Freedom Summer Virginia. First, we're going to do a short presentation on what it is. I know many of you can remember back in 1964, maybe not remember, but 1964, you had a group of people. You had a group of young people college students out of the north area, Detroit, and different places. And then you had the SNCC movement. They all went into Mississippi and they did voter registration. Well, because we worked so hard on this redistricting, and then our judicial system has become politicized and they overturned it. We are going to do Freedom Summer Virginia. And that means that I got a short presentation and we're going to run through really quickly about it. So Karen, you can go to the next slide. And we're just going to go through the welcome. Let's go to the next slide on the history of Freedom Summer. I talked a little bit about that. Yeah, and you'll get this presentation as well on how it started. Let's go to the next slide. The objective is to educate, register, and mobilize voters in low turnout areas of Virginia. We're going to do this everywhere. However, there will be a focus on the 1st, the 2nd, the 5th, and the 6th to include the 3 amendments. Now, remember, we can tell people how to vote on the amendments. We tell them that vote yes on the amendments. We're going to keep that don't guess, vote yes. We're just going to keep that going on these amendments. But we want to do, especially in the 1st, the 2nd, and 5th, and 6th, go into these 4 areas that was included in that redistricting referendum and do voter registration to turn out those votes. We just have to take them the old-fashioned way. And so we'll do that. Next slide. Education campaign. We want to host workshops and town halls. You can have them in community centers and churches. You do topics on voting rights and registration processes. We want to do social media and engagement, share informative content, have collaboration with local media, partner with radio stations for voter education segments. So those are some of the things that we will have that we'll be sending out to you all. Next. Targeted voter registration drives. So not only doing voter registration drives, but literally knocking on doors, especially if we're in these areas. So you say, how are we going to do that? Well, we can go into the vote builder system, and your PAC chair should have the training for that too. But we could pull where these areas are, so they're targeted areas. We want to focus. These are just some dates we put up here for July 25th and 26th. Do some major voter registration drives, but you can be doing it all along these voter registration drives now that you know what the new laws are, starting with voting on July the 1st. And we had a link to the training that you can do online with the Board of Elections so that you know how to do voter registration. And we will include that in the recap as well. It's only 10 minutes, but it's a good training that you can have, that you should take. August the 6th is the 61st anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. Please mark that down. Please start planning now. A weekend of action. You could do something on the 6th. You might want to do a town hall on the 6th. You might want to do a march. Weekend of action. You knock on doors, go to registration, do events. We have got to highlight the 61st anniversary of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Let's go to our next one. And dates to remember. Early vote begins September 19th, 2026. I'm talking about for the general election. We know that the primary is going to be August the 4th, and early voting has started already, actually. No, it starts the 19th. It starts July 19th. I mean, June 19th is when it starts. And then National Voter Registration Day is September the 15th. We should be having events planned around that. National Voter Education Week will have, something that you can do, but you can start planning events around that as well. And then Freedom Weekends. And this is something that Delegate Price talked about. October 17th and 18th and October 24th and 25th. What does that mean? Freedom Sunday Souls to the Polls. We want to plan the whole weekend out. We got to start planning it now. How are we going to turn out voters that Saturday and especially Sunday? Those 2 Sundays. The 17th, the 18th and the 25th. We got to start planning now. We will have work groups. Because we're gonna have you all come up with it. Suburban, urban, and rural. Your areas. Come up with some suggestions that we can share with all of our branches. Next slide. Community engagement. You have local events at farmers markets, community festivals. We do door-to-door registration. Collaborate with NAAC branches and local partners, your D9 and other organizations. We're asking the young people to barnstorm, going into bars and restaurants and different places and do voter registration. This is what I do. Whenever I speak to a group of people now, I say, anybody who's born after 1973, please stand. And I tell them that my parents and grandparents didn't have rights. I was too little to fight for rights. So they had to fight for my rights. And I tell them, but you all were born with rights. You were born with voting rights, women's reproductive freedom. You were born with affirmative action, and the list goes on. And now all of these rights are gone. And so we're in Jim Crow 2.0, and we need our young people. We got to encourage them, invigorate them to get out here and help us with this voter registration. They stand on our shoulders. They should be doing the work. And so when I said that to them, they never thought about it. And so we got people to start signing up, young people to start signing up to help with voter registration. Next slide. And so, as I said, Freedom Weekends, October 17th and 18th, October 24th and 25th, and then Freedom Summers, Souls to the Polls training. This is developing a plan. Souls to the Polls training and events. We want to provide transportation from churches to polling places. You need to meet with your faith leaders, have the community discussions, host town halls, and documentary viewings. We have a video. It's like a 4-minute video. And again, we'll include that too. And you can show that as well. But start developing a plan. But we will have work groups. We got to hear from you all. We can't plan everything for you. We got to hear from you. You know your areas. Next slide. And you can do a team structure, to have team captains. You can call them freedom guides and emphasize leadership and voter registration teams. Start developing teams where people can come out. All right, next slide. And volunteer. And voter protection training for volunteers, topics. Voter protection is going to be it's going to be so critical. And the National NAACP has a voter protection program, and we're going to make sure that we roll that out. But every branch, I know you have a PAC chair. Your PAC chair can be your voter protection, but we're also going to need voter protection work groups too. But every branch should have a voter protection person. Everyone should have one. And identifying being able to identify voter suppression tactics, assisting voters at polling places. Right, next. And of course, our Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody's free until everybody is free. And that's the reason why we're going to kick off Freedom Summer Virginia. And you'll be getting more information about that as well. And you saw our logos. Our logos was on there. I think that's the last slide. Is that right, Karen? There we go. All right. So with that, if you have any questions, but I'm going to turn it over to our president. And so he can speak on this as well. And we'll go from there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gayleen.
President Bailey. Mhm.
Thank you, Gayleen, and thank you for that rundown on Freedom Summer Virginia 2026. You know, as Gayleen very adequately explained, this initiative for this year is tied very closely to Freedom Summer 64. Some of us were alive when Freedom Summer of 1964 took place. Many of us, even if we were alive, were too young to understand it, but we all have read about the history of our civil rights movement. We all recognize that 1964 was a pinnacle year, beginning with the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1964 that year, and then the 1965 Voting Rights Act the next year. As has already been said several times during the review of our new laws and a variety of other things during this hour or so that we spent together, those things have been taken away from us. You know, wise man once said, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. Here in the United States, if you're Black, you're doomed to repeat the history and try to have to fight for your rights all over again, because that's where we are. Another wise man said that Black folk in this country don't have permanent friends and we don't have permanent enemies, but we do have permanent interests. And Freedom Summer of Virginia is about the continued fight for those permanent interests that we have. We talked about data centers this evening. We talked about the various issues that are surrounding them. The focus, of course, as with the budget battle that's going on in Richmond, is dealing with the economic portions. But Gayleen also, again, accurately pointed out that there are other issues that the NAACP has that talk about data centers, none of which form a position of anti-data centers. As a matter of fact, the NAACP is pro-data centers, but we're pro-intelligent implementation of data centers and protection of our precious marginalized communities. We continue to do those things, and we continue to talk about the fight that we have because we believe in democracy. Democracy is what has pulled us out from most of the horrors of the past of slavery and into as close as we could possibly get to equal and equitable application of the Constitution and our rights as humans in this country. But a functioning democracy requires participation. That's why we're having Freedom Summer Virginia, because we are going to acutely be involved in the participation to protect our democracy here in Virginia. We're going to focus, as Dr. Gayleen said, on 4 midterm elections in congressional districts 1, 2, 5, and 6. And we are also going to focus on the passing of those 3 constitutional amendments. Why are we going to do that? Because restoration of rights, reproductive rights, and marriage equality are basic permanent interests of the NAACP and Black people in particular. That's why we're going to continue to do that. We're also going to continue to fight against the mis and disinformation campaigns that have taken place, which have resulted in the gutting of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, in my opinion, resulted in the egregious turnaround of the Supreme Court of Virginia of the will of the people. We are going to continue to fight those things, and we're going to use some of the tools that we've used in the past, as Gayleen delineated during our presentation. But we're also going to highlight one of the things that has always been a clarion call for Black folk as we have fought this continuous fight for civil and human rights. We are going to continue in an even greater way to listen to our trusted voices, the voices of people like you and I who understand what is required to fix the problems that have been occurring this year and to make a better future for us. As Gayleen said, we are partnering even stronger with our faith-based communities. We are partnering even stronger with our community service organizations, the D9 organizations, and the others, all in the effort to ensure that we identify the correct trusted voice and that we then, as I said before, participate in the democracy that has served us better than anything else in this country as we continue the struggle. So thank you all for understanding and coming together and now being better educated about the new laws that will be affecting us from beginning July 1st. But thank you all for a silent commitment that I know you have all made to participate as strongly as possible in Freedom Summer, Virginia. Gayleen and I and other representatives who have those positions in the other southern states will be meeting twice this year. Once this coming week in Atlanta to determine a southern strategy. We believe that the strategies that have worked in Virginia will predominate in those meetings, and then those will be permeated throughout the other southern states. And then we will come again together just before the convening of our national convention in Chicago next month, where there will be a larger group of people who will be putting the finishing touches on that. And in the end, we will have a simple but powerful method and methodology and message on how we will operate as an organization as we enter into these all important midterm elections. So thank you all again for your attentiveness. And again, as I just said, thank you for your, what I know is commitment to continue the fight with us. With that, I turn it back to Gayleen for any closing remarks there as we continue the fight. Thank you all, Freedom Warriors.
Thank you, President Bailey. And Karen, our Director of Administration, sent out in the chat the upcoming state conference training. And it's there. And of course, we'll send out tools as we get tools. We're working on it now, and we'll have more things for you. But please, if you can't come, send people, send your members. Please come to this training. We need to get trained up because we got a lot of work to do, and we got to rock and roll and make sure that we win this midterms. We let me just say this: with the three amendments. We cannot tell anyone who to vote for, but we can say vote yes for the amendments because it's nonpartisan. And so we can't say that. And we know whoever supports those amendments, basically, they support what we support. So those amendments are going to be critical that we'll be able to talk about it, and we'll have some talking points for you with that. With that being said, thank you so much for being on. I hope this information was informative, and we will see you at the end of the month on June 27th. Bye-bye.